Well, good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Josh Schimmels, the publisher and CEO of the Los Angeles Business Journal, and it's an honor to be here as we kick off this year's Women's Leadership Series. For the second year now, we've extended our annual celebration of women business leaders to a series of 3 live digital events over the next 3 weeks. The format of our first 2 weeks, today and next Wednesday, will be a set of 3 panels each day covering a variety of topics. We're going to be having impactful conversations with some of the most impressive thought leaders in Greater Los Angeles. Then 2 weeks from today, on June 23rd, the series will culminate with our Women's Leadership Awards. So if you haven't registered for next week's panels or our awards, I encourage you to do so, as we have a great group of leaders to hear from, to learn about, and to honor at the end of this. Okay, so here's how today's session is going to work. We're going to hold 3 conversations, about 30 minutes in length each. The first is going to focus on beyond the glass ceiling. Then we'll discuss the greater good. And third, we'll talk about generational collaboration, which I'm really excited about because that is a new topic for us this year. I want to encourage you to learn more about each of our panelists and our moderators by going to our website and clicking on their bios. We're going to leave the link on the screen available to you throughout the afternoon. I'd also like to thank all of those who submitted questions during the registration process. We were actually able to incorporate many of them into the conversations, which means you also helped shape the content for today. So thank you. One of the things we're going to be doing live is we're going to be conducting poll questions throughout the afternoon. So they'll be related to each of the topics that we're discussing. When you see the question pop up on your screen, we'd love for you to participate and share your experiences and your opinions. We'll then be publishing the responses to all of these poll questions on our website over the next couple of days. Before we get started, I want to thank our very loyal sponsors for being a part of this. Many have been with us and this event for a number of years now. We truly appreciate your ongoing partnerships and all that you're doing to support women's leadership here in our community of business. A very special thank you to our 4 platinum sponsors: Blank Rome, RSM, UCLA Anderson School of Management, and Wells Fargo. Additionally, I'd like to show my appreciation for all of our gold sponsors joining us this year: the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, Child Care Resource Center, Colliers, 5 Point, Glazer Weil, Hanson Bridget, KPMG, LA Care Health Plan, Loyola Marymount University College of Business Administration, NutriFit, Pacifica Hospital of the Valley, Pepperdine Graziadio Business School, Reddock Law, Judicate West, Shangri-La Construction, UBS, the Vertical Collective, and Woodcraft Rangers. Thank you all so much for being a part of this entire 3-week series. And finally, I want to just take a moment to thank a few of the women here at the Los Angeles Business Journal who continue to make such incredible contributions to our weekly print publication, to our digital products, and of course, to all of the events that we host to serve our readers. So many thanks to our leadership team of Stephanie Barbarin, our managing editor, Nina Bays, our creative and production director, Alex Davila, executive director of events and marketing, and co-advertising directors Eva Juicy and Ellen Mason. Thank you all so much for all that you do. We truly have an amazing team here at the Business Journal, and you're going to get a chance to meet several of them in the upcoming weeks throughout our programs. Before we start the panel, I'd like to introduce our executive director of events and marketing to say just a few words. Alex, please join us.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. As Josh mentioned, I'm Alex Davila. I'm the executive director of events and marketing. I am so proud to be a part of this organization and this team that continually produces thought leadership events for our business community. I want to say thank you to my events team. Without you ladies, this would not be possible. You're incredibly intelligent, you're forward thinking, and beyond lovely to work with. So thank you. Here at the Los Angeles Business Journal, we have a strong culture of women, as you can see. We have several women in key leadership roles. These, along with many others, are making decisions daily that, make an impact, not just on the day-to-day of our business, but they help decide the stories and the organizations that we highlight in the journal and also at our events. This is the third Business Journal Women's Leadership Program that I've been a part of. And each year I continue to learn new insights from our expert speakers and incredible honorees. Over the last few years in my role, I've been fortunate enough to have had many conversations with these influential women all throughout LA. And I'm incredibly honored to be able to host yet another event series that showcases some of these amazing women. I hope those of you watching, and who get to rewatch it on the recording are able to take away lessons learned about how these women get to their positions and learn from some of the incredible stories that they have to share. I want to lastly thank all of the women participating in the panels. I appreciate you, your time, and your commitment to women leadership and inspiring young women across Los Angeles. So thank you, and thank you all for being here today, and I'm looking forward to a great session.
Thank you so much, Alex. I want to thank you personally for just your commitment to all of our events, our marketing, everything that you've been doing for the last year as we had to transition what was such a well-oiled in-person machine into now a well-oiled digital machine. So thank you, and your team does an outstanding job. You're all appreciated. All right, we have a lot of topics that we want to cover. So I want to jump right into our first panel now. It's entitled Beyond the Glass Ceiling. So please welcome Dr. Bernice Ledbetter, Dean of Students and Alumni Affairs with Pepperdine Graziadio Business School. Dee Dee Owens, Partner Advisory Market Leader for the Pacific Southwest at KPMG. Jody Poirier, Executive Managing Director, Greater Los Angeles with Colliers. Angela Reddick Wright, Employment Mediator and Arbitrator with Reddick Law Judicate West. And today's moderator, Corinne Bendersky, Professor of Management and Organizations with UCLA Anderson School of Management. Corinne, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Josh. It's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be moderating this panel. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to get us started right away with a question to everyone on the panel here. Could we please hear your thoughts about what you believe are the greatest barriers women face to achieving equity and equality in the workplace? Bernice, let's start with you, please.
Corinne, thank you so much. It's a great question and one that we need to deal with, certainly. I think that one of the barriers is to intentionally create flexible work-life balance, especially for working mothers. And here's why. 2.5 million women have lost their jobs or left the workforce during the pandemic. Many of those women are working mothers. In fact, the pandemic has actually altered the equation, pushing roughly 33% of working mothers to consider downshifting their careers or leaving their jobs altogether. Moreover, the pandemic has affected working mothers of color disproportionately in terms of their family and childcare and household responsibility. So this is significant because if there are fewer women positioned to move into managerial roles, progress on advancing women to higher levels of leadership will stall or slip backwards altogether. So I think creating equity and equality will only be possible if all women can equally contribute. Businesses will need to nurture a culture in which working mothers have equal opportunity to achieve their potential through creating work-life flexibility. So I think actually the way we structure work is one of the barriers that can prevent women from experiencing equality and equity.
Thank you, Bernice. Dee Dee, I'd love to hear your thoughts, please.
Yes, and I absolutely agree with that, and creating alternative work arrangements. I would say for me, there's some barriers that I create for myself, and I think some women may do this as well, is just as an example, I remember early in my career, I was speaking about accomplishments and skills and how ready I was to get to the next level. And the woman leader that I was speaking to said, well, did you ask for it? Did you ask for the promotion? And candidly, I was waiting for somebody else to tell me I was ready. So I think some of that is making sure that we are our biggest champions and have the confidence to ask. I would say from an external barrier, the other thing is that we're trying to push internally and educate folks is on unconscious bias. I think we all have potential to do that. and educating ourselves to recognize when we're doing that and kind of pushing past that, I think, is a barrier that we have to overcome to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, and we get the women in the workplace and at the career levels that we need women in the boardrooms, in the leadership rooms, and we have to get past that bias that seems to be triggered periodically.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Angela, what are your thoughts?
Wow. So I think we all borrowed each other's notes because my comments are very similar. So I think the biggest barriers center around what I call our adopting the I'm every woman philosophy. In fact, it's a positive thing. We all know that song. We love it. We jump on the dance floor. And so I put that into 4 quick categories. One is that we all have to be a part, as Dr. Ledbetter said, of bridging that gap between the haves and the have-nots. Just as much as we need women at the top and in the middle, we've got to bring up the bottom and make sure that those women who've been impacted by the pandemic and who had to make those tough choices about work or childcare or work or take care of my sick parent or work or any other number of factors, that we're also bringing those women up. Secondly, we have to make sure that we are filling the C-suite at the top. Statistics show that women are in the managerial roles, but that we're not moving as quickly into the C-suite. In fact, LA Business Journal reported yesterday in its executive compensation study that the 2 women who made the list actually by the time of the publication weren't going to have stepped down from the C-suite. So it brought the numbers down even more so. So we've got to be a part of that. And of course, of getting women on boards. Women and women of color as well on boards. Then we have, as Dee Dee indicated, we've got to be a part of mentoring and sponsoring other women. We can't allow our own unconscious biases to allow us that when we make it, not to bring up other women behind us. We have to be very intentional and thoughtful about that. And when we have the power to make those decisions, that we're not afraid to make those decisions. And then finally, right, dear to me and the work that I do every day centers around helping prevent harassment and discrimination in the workplace. We have to be intentional about creating workplaces that have a zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination, and creating a workplace that's friendly to women and that's supportive of women and that allows women and people of color to flourish in the workplace.
Thank you, Angela. And last but definitely not least, Jody, please share your thoughts.
Hi, thank you. Happy to. And yeah, I think we covered some really important barriers that women do face, and truly all underrepresented groups in the workplace face. And I think what I will contribute to this question is, I think it really comes down to the various points that have been mentioned. So the flexibility, the unconscious bias, the mentoring and inclusion of women. And so it's taking all of those, very important aspects and then driving them throughout the organizations of which we all are part, and driving them throughout every single level to, down to the water cooler chat or team happy hour that you may be out at. So it's having those champions from the boardroom all the way down just to your your chat room or your small boardroom in an office, and making sure that these women are included. And it's seeing a woman that's maybe gravitating towards the back of a meeting and saying, hey, pull up a chair, sit down right next to me, come on over here. It's even little things like that on the day-to-day where all of us, regardless of our title, can make a difference, and regardless of whatever gender we identify with, can really make a difference.
Thank you. That was an inspiring start from the panel. Next, I'm going to go to Bernice and ask you to share your thoughts about what breakthroughs you see on the horizon that will minimize some of these barriers for women, particularly women in leadership positions.
Thank you so much, Karin. That's a great question. I do think there's some good news. So I think the emerging workplace is really at an inflection point where 3 dynamics have the possibility to intersect in a way that really creates opportunity for women. So as I just mentioned, having flexible work schedules will get more women back into the workforce. So I think that's one of the opportunities that's coming forward that will create the opportunity to minimize barriers, obviously. Secondly, I think the workplace of the future will be a place of increased emphasis on relational skills, because routine problems, are going to be solved and already are solved by algorithms, but relationship workers will be able to solve the more complex human challenges that we face in the workplace. These kinds of relationship workers, they're creative people who are skilled at working with others to solve complex problems. And those kinds of folks will have an abundance of opportunities. I think these skills play well to women, kind of in a wonderful way in terms of where the workforce is going. And then thirdly, I think because of the shift to putting an emphasis on, I don't like to call it soft skills, I like to call them essential skills, mandatory skills, because there'll be an emphasis on relational skills. I think women will see an opportunity to lead with greater authenticity, which really is simply just a healthy alignment between one's values and one's behaviors. And I think this is going to create an opportunity, the workforce of the future is going to create an opportunity for us all to redefine who we are and what we want in life and in work, and to be able to feel like we can bring our authentic selves to work. And the research suggests that when we're able to do that, we lead with higher levels of engagement, we create job satisfaction for ourselves and for those that we work with, and our performance goes up as well. And so I think the horizon that's coming is actually going to play so magnificently well to the hand that women already carry, the hand of cards, if you will. And so I'm really excited to see what comes next. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate your optimism. Jody, this question is for you. Ambition is seen as a positive trait in men, yet is often criticized when seen in women. How does this view impact women's advancement, and how do we positively change this perception?
Thank you. That's a great question, and one I'm certainly ambitious about. First off, ambition is not a dirty word. So I like to walk that right out there. It's not a dirty word for a person of any gender, but unfortunately it sometimes can be perceived as such. So how do we change that? It's tough. It's a tough, kind of hill to climb in that regard, because society, if you're going back, probably hundreds of years, there is the stereotypical view that people, regardless of gender, can have of particular genders, that men are tough and women are more demure and should be grateful, and men are the go-getters. And so we have these stereotypes that that really plague all genders. And in this case, we're talking about women. So when it comes to ambition, it's, oh gosh, well, she's awfully ambitious, and can sometimes be put out there as it's a negative thing. Whereas, sometimes with men, it's, wow, well, what a go-getter, he's so ambitious. Let's bring that to a place of equality and realize that it's not a dirty word for women, that women too can be ambitious, women can be direct, women can be controversial, and that's okay. And I don't mean controversial in a bad way, but hey, we can go right out there just as a man does and say things that maybe push the limits, and that doesn't make us any more or less anything. So it's really coming back to that. I think it was Angela maybe that mentioned the unconscious, or it was Dee Dee that mentioned the unconscious bias. I think a couple of us did. So it's how do we tackle that double blind bias, that there's a mismatch between what we expect women to act and behave like versus what we expect a leader to act and behave like. And that mismatch is what we need to continually challenge. So to the women out there, I say, own your power. Don't apologize for your success, applaud your success and applaud other women's success. And we're all human beings. So let's applaud our successes regardless of gender.
Thank you. Great answer. I appreciate that very much. Next question is for Dee Dee. Dee Dee, what can female executives do now to continue making change happen? And really, how can we change the perspective that women in leadership roles are rare or unexpected?
So I really love the strength and the optimism that I've heard so far. And I would say for this is we as female leaders need to be intentional about doing this. It's so easy to get caught up in just everything that we're doing every day, but we have to make it a focus to bring the women and other unrepresented talent around us and bring them with us. So I try to do a few things. One is, if you're in the room and you have the opportunity to make change, make that change. So if I'm in a room and we're talking about whether it be programs for staff and employees, bringing the perspective of women to the conversation, being bold, talking about alternative work arrangements, ideas and thoughts that would help basically retain women. We've had many conversations with some folks that I work with that when you reach a certain level of leadership and you also want to have a family or you're taking care of existing family, that it's a challenge. I have the opportunity, and I'm sure others to have the opportunity to change that and bring that up. So highlight that, push the status quo. The other one is helping other women around you. So I think we've talked a little bit about bringing people with you. So if I go to a meeting or an event, bringing someone with me to that meeting to give them the opportunity to network, to meet the mentors and sponsors that they should have around them to help them as well, but also giving the opportunity to exercise the skills of talking about what you do and being a champion of yourself. And last but not least, just being there to listen. It is hard. It is really hard to be the biggest champion of you and be that person that talks about your skills in a way that other people can recognize, your power. And being there as a sounding board, providing feedback and mentorship and taking the time to do that. So I'd say those three things are things that I try to focus on, and I hope others can do that.
Thank you. And I think that's a wonderful segue to the next question, which is for Angela. What advice would you provide to women for negotiating their pay and value and achieving pay and equity, salary equity in the workplace?
Thank you. Great question. So I absolutely believe that a key to our continuing to break and shatter the glass ceiling, the concrete ceiling, whatever we want to call it as women, is that there has to be pay equity. We have to get rid of the pay disparities between men and women. It's no secret, the statistics are out there that women make 78 cents for every dollar as their male counterparts, and the numbers are even more dire for women of color, Black women and Latino women. Black women are paid 38 cents per dollar, Latino are 38% less, 45% less for Latino women, and the numbers go on and on. But there is hope. In California, for example, we have the California Fair Pay Equity Act that requires and is compelling employers to look across the board at how they pay people, to provide reports of that, and to create pay equity within their environments. And many states are taking the lead in that same regard. But while things are happening legally and from a regulatory perspective, here are 4 or 5 things that we can do as women to ensure that we're getting paid what we're worth. So my very first boss as a lawyer told me, you'll be successful no matter what you do, as long as you're good at what you do, as long as you hone your skills and you try to be the best at what you do. So I think we start there. We don't want to walk into that room demanding more money, but we're not quite doing what we're supposed to do in terms of contributing to our organizations. So be good at what you do, invest in your skills, invest in your talents, try to be the best. Secondly, when you are looking to make sure that you're paid equitably or to get that salary increase or promotion, do your homework, both internally and externally. Know what others inside are making. Now in California, part of that Fair Pay Equity Act is that we are able to know the ask salary information. It used to be taboo to ask and to inquire about what others are making, but now there's a right to know and to have that information. So do your homework, know what you're up against, know what skill sets are required for the position that you're in. Build your network, talk to other women, get advice on how other women negotiated pay or moved up within their companies. Let, your mentors and your sponsors, talk to them as to how you should approach it, especially if it's a sensitive topic within your organization. Know your worth. And I should have started there, like know that you are worthy, that you are valuable, and that if you are being underpaid, then you want to take proactive steps to try to correct that. And then you want to understand the legal landscape that we're in, where I think most of the people on this call are in California. So we are in a very fortunate position, and that we are in a state that are actively trying to promote and create, regulations and laws that allow for pay equity throughout different companies and organizations. So those are the things that I would recommend. But I think the top of that is being good at what you do, know your value. And then once you know that, do your research and then go after it, and, be thoughtful about how you go after negotiating higher pay and ensuring that you are being paid equitably within your organization.
Thank you so much, Angela. That's really wise advice. Next question is for Bernice. What advice would you offer to young women who seek to achieve higher levels of leadership?
Thank you. Great question. I get asked this question a lot by my students at the Gratuito School. And so here are just a few thoughts on how to achieve higher levels of leadership in the organization. First, I think it's important as women to claim our achievements. Sometimes we're a little bit demure and we don't want to draw a lot of attention to ourselves. We want our accomplishments to be noticed just, on their own merit. And while that's wonderful, sometimes we may run the risk of getting overlooked. So I always tell my students, claim your achievements and be proud of them. Don't minimize your accomplishments. At the same time, be humble. Don't be arrogant, but it's okay to take credit for the good and wonderful work that you've done. Angela just talked about understanding your worth, and through that you'll be accomplishing lots of important things, and it's good and important and necessary to claim that. I think secondly, and this has been brought up and I want to underscore it, learn how to build and leverage your network, because opportunity comes oftentimes and most of the time through relationships. And so it's not enough just to build a network. You have to also learn how to leverage that network. Meet with people in your network, do informational interviews to learn about what people do in different sectors and different positions, to answer questions, to be, a kind of mentor in a sense. Mentoring can be a one-time meeting and it can be a lifetime of conversation. Both count as mentoring in my book. And so leveraging your network really creates opportunity for you. And so think about how you'll leverage that beautiful, wonderful network that you've created. And then on that note, finally, it's important and really essential to build allies across the organization, especially at the start of a new position. Marshall Goldsmith and Sally Hegelson, who wrote the book, How Women Rise, say, to be fully credible, you're always going to need allies. So your credibility is in a kind of maybe unsuspecting sense is really built by other people speaking highly about you when you're not there. Sometimes women want to put their heads down, work hard, master what they're doing, and then go out into the organization to build relationships. And actually the reverse order of that is more important. When you start something new or you're taking on a new project, go out and talk to people, build alliances, build relationships, get information, and then come back and put that together and begin the mastery process of whatever it is you're working on or that new position that you're acquiring. So I think those are three things that women can do to rise to higher levels of leadership.
Thank you so much. And a similar question now going to Dee Dee in response to a comment that was just put in the Q&A. What advice would you give particularly to the young women who are listening in on today's session? What would you believe maybe even you would have done differently?
I wish I had Bernice giving me coaching throughout my career as I was moving up. Because candidly, I mean, there's a few things that I really would have done differently, and a lot of them align with your thoughts and recommendations. I mean, the first is I would have been more bold. I would have been more bold in asking for what I felt I was ready for and what I deserved, and been not afraid of people saying no, because the worst thing they can do that I know now looking back is say no, and I can learn from that and figure out how to ask the question differently. So that's definitely one. So be bold. The next thing is be yourself. The reason why we need more women in leadership roles is your perspectives and your experiences are different. And try not to change who you are to try to fit in that room. I mean, I know I've questioned myself, quite a bit over my 25-year career of saying, oh, what I said wasn't exactly the same thing. Maybe I said it wrong, or you second guess yourself. Try not to do that, and just be kind to yourself. Know that you're different and that's okay, and it should be that way. So try not to change just because what you're saying is not the same. And the last thing is find your supporters. I was lucky early in my career that I had a couple of folks that were just really champions of me and gave me the courage to do some of the things that helped me aspire to where I am to now career-wise. And they were mostly men. And asking them to be supporters of you and take the time to nurture those relationships. And there's still people I stay in touch with today, and I'm very fortunate and grateful to have them in my life. But make sure that you try to find those people both within your organization, and I feel importantly outside of your organization, because the coaching that I've received to ask for the raise, ask for the promotion, some of that is helpful to get perspectives that are outside of your four walls. So I think those would be my things.
Terrific. Thank you. Wonderful advice. Jody, can you share with us your thoughts about what, besides implicit bias training, can companies do to mitigate the biases that women are up against?
Yes, so a couple thoughts on that. First, when it comes to training, I think having bias training period is certainly a great first step. So that is good. A lot of companies I know are doing that online and having it be kind of an automated training, and I think that, again, good first step. But augmenting that with really some in-person types of roundtable discussions led by leadership, whether it be from, again, global leadership down to local leadership, who really helps bring together a diverse group of people around the table to, one, get understanding of, what are people experiencing out there in terms of bias. And a lot of bias is also, it's unconscious. And so it's people, the more they understand that there is this, unconscious bias out there, that implicit bias, just recognizing it and understanding what that is a first step. So I think the more that we can do that's face to face, I know it takes more work, but I think the gains from that and having that community established at the local level within organizations can really, start changing or moving the needle, I should say. And then something tactical would be, I know a lot of companies have harassment policies that are actually written in part of the policies that companies operate under. Add true bias policies around that as well, again, to help bring attention that things like that really do exist, and they affect women and underrepresented groups of all types. Being able to, one, just step into roles that, the broken rung on a ladder, they're not even able to get into the first kind of layer of leadership, let alone, reach the invisible glass ceiling.
Thank you so much. It's so important to have dialogue and not just be talked at with respect to bias and bias mitigation. This last question, we're gonna just do quick fire, 30 seconds, please, for each one of the panelists. Angela, let's start with you. Who or what has helped you break through the glass ceiling and have a seat at the table?
So many people have, but the two ladies that come to mind today are Naomi, who was my first legal boss. She was tough. She was tough as nails, very stern. When you looked at her, you didn't know how to read her face, but she taught me how to be a lawyer. She taught me how to be good at what I do and how to have tough skin. And then Mordina, God bless her, she passed last year or earlier this year. And Mordina was the first, she's much more senior than me, and she was the first to take me by, the wings and walk me into my first nonprofit board, a pretty high level board, and help me to move up in leadership within that organization, even when I didn't think I could or should. And so I just thank her for that opportunity.
Terrific. Those champions and sponsors are so important. Dee Dee, how about for you?
I'd say for me, definitely supporters. I'm starting, with my mom, right? Somebody who basically says you can do it and you need to do it and you can believe in yourself. But I would also say is just sticking with it and having the grit and determination to just push through difficult situations and know that, you can get there.
Yeah, confidence can lead to that kind of persistence. So important. Thank you. Bernice, please.
Thank you so much. I also have been the beneficiary of sponsors who have opened doors for me. And oftentimes we don't even know that our sponsors are doing that for us. And that was the situation for me. And so I'm very grateful for individuals who promoted me and created opportunities for me to advance. I think the other thing that I've always tried to do is operate from a clear sense of values, which really resolve around benevolence and achievement. I think I've always tried to be someone who is a high achiever, but to also bring others along and to have a sense of compassion and benevolence. I think that's created opportunities for me.
And no doubt for others as well. Thank you. Jody, please.
Thank you. First and foremost, my rock star of a mother. She's really raised me as a single mom from age 2 on and showed me firsthand that as a woman, you can do and overcome anything. So that's how I was raised, which I think had a great positive effect on me. And then I've been fortunate throughout my professional career to be surrounded by some really fabulous leadership who do happen to be a male, and they have been champions of me and mentors of mine across numerous organizations. And I'm very thankful for that sponsorship and continued mentorship as I navigate my career.
I think it's wonderful and really important to highlight how all of you have mentioned the importance of having women as mentors and sponsors and people in your network and advisors, and also men, and that we don't limit ourselves only to seeking advice from other women, but realizing that our champions can come from anywhere in the organization. So thank you so much to our panel. I really appreciate your wisdom and your optimism, sharing your experience with us. I'd like to turn this back over to Josh.
Well, thank you so much. I think we couldn't have asked for a better way to start this entire series. What a great panel, fantastic information. And as I'm sitting there listening, and I've got 2 daughters, I'm a father of 2 daughters, which I talk about them often on these event calls. It's so great to hear actionable takeaways that young women can listen to and learn from. So many wonderful things said. So thank you, Corinne, Angela, Jody, Dee Dee, Dr. Ledbetter. We truly value all of your perspectives. What a wonderful start to this series. So thank you. All right, we're going to move right into our second panel, which is entitled Generational Collaboration. So let's meet our panelists. Alice Juarez, Region Bank President with Wells Fargo. Precious Mays, CEO and President, Pacifica Hospital of the Valley. Ellen Way, Director of Field Operations with Shangri-La Construction. Catherine Zabladil, Co-founder and CEO, The Vertical Collective. And our moderator for this panel is Dale Smith. She's the Dean of LMU College of Business Administration. Welcome and thank you so much for being here, Dean Smith.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks. What a great panel we just got to hear. So let's go deep into some of the issues that we are talking about. Basically, generational collaboration. Can you teach an dog new tricks? I certainly hope so, given so many of us are managing Gen Xers, the Gen Y millennials, and Gen Zers. So first question we have for our panelists is, what does generational awareness mean to you? And what would your advice be in dealing with generational differences in the workplace? Why don't we start with Alice?
All right, thank you, Dale, and good afternoon, everyone. It's been exciting just to hear our first panel. But for me, when I think of generational awareness, really look at it as the importance of creating that generational awareness that puts us in a mindset that encourages us to be good listeners, helps us to work towards understanding our differences, and looks for us to hear other people's voices. It's more about getting away from stereotypes. And I know we heard earlier a lot about unconscious bias. We're really tied to be given a generation by truly appreciating the ideas, talents, and experiences that thrive in our generations that are around us every day. And as we're being aware of generations, we think of the wider viewpoints it brings to us. And I think to me, especially every day in my personal life, I have some Gen Zers. So definitely get to know and connect and see that different perspective, as well as within my workplace. If a piece when you say advice to give to others, I want to think of what our world looks like today. There are 5 generations working in today's changing world. And if we consider some demographic shifts we're going to see over the next few years, or actually next 10 years, I'd say, today's minorities will be the majority in the next 10 years, led by Latino and Hispanic population. The majority of boomers will transition to retirement, as we've continued heard over time. And millennials or Gen Yers, as we've also heard them, they're going to dominate the workforce and be having new family creation. The divide between the affluent and under-resourced will widen even further. And women will control a significant portion of consumer wealth. So it's really important as we think about this that workforce demographics will continue to shift throughout our careers. And so it's important for us to increase our generational awareness to be more effective at leading across those differences and removing that unconscious bias so that we can connect and walk in their shoes. And one last part, I'll give you an example, and I think many of you can relate today, is we can be attached to a generation. All of us have a mixture of where we're sat in, but it doesn't mean we align with all those characteristics. And that's why we have to be able to walk in other people's shoes. While I'm a Generation Xer, I don't necessarily relate to all characteristics prescribed for that generation. So I think that's an important piece of generation awareness to me.
Thanks, Alice. Next up, Precious.
Thank you, Dale. Great question. As I really reflect on the last 1.5 years as a leader and a CEO of an acute care hospital in Los Angeles, I became very aware of the generational awareness that we had in our workforce. When the rest of the world was actually shutting down and we were having to find ways to navigate really uncharted waters without a real playbook in healthcare, and how we had nurses and doctors come out of retirement, and nurses and physicians and CNAs and all of the healthcare workforce come out of college without even finishing their clinical rotations because we were short-staffed, because we had such a pandemic on our hands. You could see the collaboration, and you could see through the multicultural and the generational abstract that we had, and how we needed to navigate the waters and actually come together, learn how to communicate, be transparent, learn how to teach, and be mentored all at the same time.
Yeah, good point. Your advice?
You know what? I would say that take the opportunity to actually learn to teach and mentor others. And then also remember that we can also be taught and we can learn from others as well, regardless of the generation gaps and who we're out there working with.
Yeah, all good points. Ellen was next.
Yes, thank you. I agree with every comment so far. I think in terms of generational awareness, it really is what was being discussed in the previous panel, and this just acknowledging potentially our own biases but pursuing the different perspective. And so as women, we all know that we have a different perspective, at least in male-dominated fields. And so acknowledging that there is a different perspective within age ranges as well, and that there's a different frame of reference, and that my jokes about TV shows in the 70s are going to fall completely flat. So that is part also of my, advice, is to use a sense of humor and make fun of myself if I am telling jokes that are completely outside of the frame of reference. Acknowledge it and move on. And don't expect that the way, for me, so I don't want to forget what I was like when I was young. You couldn't tell me anything and I knew everything already. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to impose that onto the younger people I'm working with, but that is a fairly common trait from what I understand about young people who have gotten older. And then, so my advice to the younger, as an older person now, it's like, okay, I recognize I used to be a certain way and I'm not that way anymore. And so that my advice to the younger people is that don't expect to think the way that you're thinking now for the rest of your life. It is going to change. That's been my perspective and my experience. So that would be my advice too, that open your mind. It's okay. It's okay to say you don't know certain things that I had a hard time with when I was young.
Good points. Thanks. Catherine, your thoughts?
Thank you, Gail. So to me, the topic really centers around learning the communication styles of each one of our employees. I have 4 out of the 5 workforce generations on my team. The millennial and Gen Y employees want a lot more interaction than Gen X. Everyone works at different paces and different cadences and speed. We also have a team based in Hong Kong that encompasses 4 generations as well in a completely different culture. So it adds another significant layer to our day-to-day communications and just how we work as a team. I think it's really important to look for signs that they understand you and the way you communicate and share information. I find that younger generations want to ask a lot of questions before they really fully grasp the task. So having the patience to repeat yourself or maybe reset the way that you're communicating the details or explaining something several times is really key. And my advice is really to try not to move at hyper speeds. I know that's my Gen X norm. It's how I was trained. Really allows the younger generations, the younger employees on the team to, millennial and Gen Z, gives them the time to process what it is I'm trying to get across at the speed that they can retain the information. So it's helpful and useful and provides knowledge to them doing their job.
Thanks. So let's talk strategy more specifically. Let's start with Precious. Can you share an example of a best practice that you found successful that involved that generational collaboration?
Oh, Dale, great question. So obviously being in the healthcare world and during the pandemic and social distancing and as the world is shutting down and how to actually learn and mobilize your executive team, your director team, your external, as well as your internal team is having and holding virtual meetings, having to, through the generational aspect of some of my team members, from those that I never want to touch the tech to those that, multitask to the tech area, and actually having them to collaborate and come together and learn it and really learn to communicate through different styles, whether via the virtual aspect or the text or the chat aspect of that. And then also leading through that and finding yourself having to lead in a different way than you normally would lead through because of the pandemic and because of what we were going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so it was really the Zoom component, the virtual component.
Yeah, good insight there. Alice, talk to us about some ways that employees can build that generational awareness outside of their everyday work role.
Great question, Dale. When I think of myself and for anyone out there that wants to, I like to lead with a learning lens. And I think that's important for everyone always to look at how can we continue to learn. So I often encourage those that I support and mentor to learn about different diversity dimensions and others to help them welcome and value different perspectives, whether that's going externally, thinking of volunteering outside, right, the organization, be able to support and learn about different generations within that spectrum, right, and different perspectives. Also leverage employee resource networks that could be in your organization. It's outside of your daily work, but really looking for an example. We have a My Generations Employee Connection Network in our organization that provides a forum for voices of all generations to be heard. And it really enhances that generational awareness and promoting generational engagement together and within the community. The other piece is looking for, as we heard earlier, people talked about organizational learnings, diversity, equity, and inclusion learnings that are available to them, really builds a foundation and helps them understand representing the diversity in our customers and our colleagues and how they connect from that spectrum. It isn't just what they're doing, but how are they connecting and understanding that those different personalities and what they're thinking and what their life is like from their view. It helps them foster and create that inclusive culture. And then seeking acceptance and encouraging those diverse perspectives really makes others feel included and valued. So I think it's important to look at those different ways that they can be supported, just not through their roles, but externally through opportunities that a company may offer out in the communities to support. Really adds that value. And then looking at courses out there that talk about understanding unconscious bias. We said the myths, right? The myths about biases. It's important to be educated about that and really connect to build those relationships within your organization with mentors and sponsors as well, to give you that perspective and lenses that you're looking at.
Yeah, that lens is a really important perspective and leads very nicely into the next question I have for Ellen. What advice do you give younger women, sort of a gendered perspective, who are starting out in a male-dominated field like the construction industry?
Well, I would start with saying focus on the similarities, not the differences. Now, men are people too. And so they might be a little bit different than we are, but at base, we're all human beings and have a lot of the same needs, wants, desires, ambition, etc. Now, having said that, as a female in a male-dominated field, your unique perspective is just that. It's unique, and your approach is going to be one of your greatest assets. That unique approach and perspective is one of your greatest contributions. So don't be afraid to contribute that in. I would also say to just go ahead and confound expectations. Don't be thrown. I know from my experience, quite often people would come to a job site. This is more when I was in the field as a superintendent or the senior superintendent, and people would come to the field and ask to see the superintendent. They would ask me like I was the secretary or the admin, and then I would say, yeah, that's me, and their eyes would get big. Don't be thrown by that initial reaction. Just go right into your job. Develop your expertise. It was stated earlier too, confound the expectation, really know your stuff. And that initial reaction is very quickly passed over, glossed over. It really does not matter. You don't have to draw attention to it or be thrown by it. So that would be my other thing. And my third comment is to wear sensible shoes. I found it really works for me.
Thanks, Ellen. Catherine, this one's for you. As we talk strategy, how do managers bring generations in their workforce together? How do you really build that bond? And are there differences internationally as you talk about managing two sets of teams across time zones and countries?
Well, I mean, to Ellen's point, we have to find common ground to bring generations together. And what a better place than the workforce, right? Younger generations want to work on teams, and 65% of them are actually visual learners. You just look at the success of YouTube and TikTok. Because of that, I encourage group meetings on a daily basis where our teams sit together and present their work on screen, hopefully in person eventually, just to keep everyone focused and engaged. We encourage everyone in attendance to share their feedback. So we want to hear from everyone in the room, young to old and everyone in between, to really get their feedback. Our industry is on the creative side. Mm-hmm. So, it's incredible to see what one generation's thinking is versus, against a certain topic versus another, especially in a creative, fast-paced environment. And sometimes it's not maybe the most efficient way for some of our older generation employees, but we find it incredibly helpful to our collaborative process at the end of the day, and that helps the organization overall. And it's time consuming, right? But the investment in time is worth it when I see everyone working together, everyone coming to the table, sharing their thoughts, their feelings in a really open, comfortable place. It really helps, everyone understand the big picture, work with the clients better, and just be a powerful team.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's really about that diversity of skill and thought when you frame it in that way. This next question is for Precious. Regis, could you tell us a little bit about what you've experienced in bringing together that different style of generational communication when you're forming the team?
Absolutely. And again, in healthcare, what I found was pretty amazing this last 2 years, and especially through this pandemic, is how it actually strengthened, given the circumstances that they were given, and crossing those different generations. We have all of them in our workforce. How it strengthened the operational aspect of what we have. It also strengthened the culture of our organization. And even when the world was polarized out there during this pandemic, how it brought the organization together for the common good and the common culture aspect of it. So it was pretty amazing to see that. I think that we just need to appreciate and respect and have transparency through those, and be open to the communication, and know that everybody has a different style and a different process. And if we're able to be open and listen, I think that we can get through that and pay it forward.
Yeah, thank you. This next question takes a little bit of a left turn here, but really trying to understand what is your why and who inspired you and what motivates you as you think about this issue, broadly speaking. Ellen, any insights?
Yes, I guess my why is really longevity. My life expectancy is about over 100 based on my grandparents. And happiness, right? I'm very motivated by feeling good and being happy. And the being happy, ironically, is not about wresting satisfaction from circumstances or achieving one's goals. It really is more about living a life of service and helping those around me to achieve their goals. That is really what makes me happy. And then the longevity component really is keeping my mind engaged. And I plan to never retire. So, that goes in that whole category, only because I want to keep my brain active. I saw my mother and my father's mother and her, they mentally have disappeared years before their bodies did. And I do not want to fall into that category. So I'm very motivated to keep my brain engaged. And I'm grateful that work allows me to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Alice, how about you? Your why? Who inspires? What motivates?
Well, and thinking this was a great question, Dale, and thinking of it is really, always start with why is my kids. Let me throw that out to you, right? My family. But at Wells Fargo, really, I look at, for me, in the role I play, I'm privileged to lead 680 branch banking employees across Los Angeles County, which collectively, they support thousands of customers and hundreds of small business customers. That talks about lots of generations, just talking about what we're talking about today. I'm also a member of the California Restaurant Association Foundation Board of Directors, and that really connects just to those business owners and all the generational ownership of different businesses, right? What they're in, what their family legacies are. So I'm really motivated by just looking through my roles, from being a board member and leading a team. I personally was able to take a front row seat during COVID last year, looking through the pandemic, and looked how it impacted so many of our entrepreneurs, small businesses, especially our minority and women-owned businesses. And likewise, I've seen some amazing stories of resiliency coming through that. And that motivates me, is seeing that resiliency, that passion, innovation, and grit that was there. And then from finding success through, curbside delivery, we've seen our restaurants change, right? And what they look like, that reaching out to customers new ways, adding community service to the menu. I'm inspired by so many stories of businesses that found a way to stay open there. And I would like to add at the end here is, I'm also proud to share that Wells Fargo is committed to fostering an inclusive recovery for women-owned businesses in LA County. And as part of our Open for Business Fund today, we'll be awarding $3.6 million to help Cal State Los Angeles, Together for LA, and New Economics for Women provide the vital multilingual and culturally informed technical assistance Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, small business owners need to adapt and sustain economic recovery. So that's my passion, how we help businesses, how we help lead the team through generations. That really continues to motivate and inspire me.
Sure. No, thanks for sharing that. Catherine, this next question is for you. What are the kinds of employee benefits that we can offer that appeal to all employees across the generations?
Well, each generation has a very different set of values, as you know, we're all aware of. So we have to get really creative with benefits that appeal to all employees, so everyone feels heard and part of the group. And you know, some benefits are simple to offer and can go a long way with younger employees, as opposed to the security or growth-based benefits that older generations want. At the Vertical Collective, we of course offer all the traditional benefits to all employees, but we also offer, you know, quite a bit of non-traditional benefits that resonate with each generation. So for instance, you know, we offer an allowance to attend conferences, trade shows, and industry events throughout the US. And our boomer generations love that, right? That we offer that. We offer work performance-based bonuses, which are Gen Xers. Just obviously they're the workhorses behind our entire organization. So they really, really feed off of that. We offer, you know, flexible vacation time, which is more for our millennial team members, summer Fridays, which everyone loves, and strong eco office protocols. This has been something that's been on our radar for a while now. We've put into work this last couple of years, but really focusing on recycling, bringing in your own water bottles, just being part of reducing any potential, you know, carbon footprint. We make products, so it's really hard. We have paper and packages and all kinds of samples coming in constantly, but really making an effort as a team, as a company, to address it internally really speaks to the younger generations. They feel like they're part of, you know, helping the environment in some small way. And then we try to do a catered team lunch at least once a week, where all of the teams can be together and try to just have that social collaboration. I think it really, you know, shatters a lot of, you know, differences between the generations, really fosters that team spirit, kind of cracks some of the emotions, allows people to take a break from work and just be together, not talk about work most often. And our team really across, you know, the Gen Z generation loves it, but really it really kind of feeds the soul of truly everyone in the organization. We found so much value behind doing that.
Yeah, Breaking Bread certainly brings folks together from a wide range of perspectives and differences. Okay, time for speed round. The final question for everyone is thinking about this issue in terms of emotional intelligence, or why is empathy an important quality to look for when you're hiring employees across different generations? Let's start with you, Alice.
Well, quickly, I'd say just we need that so much in our world today, and it's important to be understanding and walk in other people's shoes. So I think it's a key piece of the business to make sure we do have that connection. So to me, that's just, I think it's human. It's just a human nature. We need to have it, and we need more of that in our world today.
Thanks. And fire round, Precious, how about you?
Thank you. Obviously, in healthcare, one of the number one qualities you want to have as your caregiver and as a receiver of caregiving is that you want somebody to be empathetic to where you're currently at. Everybody has a heart. So just knowing that the empathy is something that it does cross generations, and we want to receive it, and we also need to be able to give it.
Yeah, well said. Ellen, how about you?
Yes, I'll say in our business, we're a business of teams, and empathy is key to collaboration.
Thank you. Catherine, last word.
As a product manufacturer, empathy and patience when corresponding with clients throughout the US, and then communicating with our overseas teams when there's a language barrier and a cultural, you know, very vast cultural difference, it's really the entire formula for our organization, everything.
Thanks so much. What great insights that you've all shared. It's really managing across generations is inevitably about managing and valuing individual differences. So you're certainly seeing the theme across the panels here as we all grow and develop and manage change. Back to you, Josh.
Well, thank you so much. I thought this was a really interesting panel, and I knew it would be the case going in because it's a topic that is so relevant to all of us in business. You know, I look at it as it pertains to my own personal situation. My mentor, she for the past 22 years, she's in the baby boomer generation, and then I've worked in organizations that have been predominantly Gen X. And then I worked in another organization that was 85% female employees and 81% millennials. And I've got 2 daughters in the Gen Z category that I deal with at home. So, what I found is if you can find that collaboration, that perfect combination of collaboration amongst the generations in the workplace, amazing innovative results typically follow for a company. So I think this is a subject that is really important. I want to thank the entire panel, Dean Smith, Catherine, Ellen, Precious, and Alice. Wonderful, thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to shifting topics a little bit. Our next panel is going to share their experience and guidance on the importance of being involved in the communities in which we serve, and also tying that into how that experience helped to shape their careers and how it can help to shape others that are listening in. So please welcome our panelists, Julie Brooks, Chief Executive Officer with Woodcraft Rangers, Ellen Cervantes, Vice President and Chief Operating Officer with Child Care Resource Center, Elisa Pastor, Partner and Co-Chair of the Government and Regulatory Department at Glazer Weil, and our moderator today, Kate Seitz, Assurance Partner with RSM US. Kate, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
All right, thanks, Josh. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today moderating this panel with these 3 great women. We only have 30 minutes together, so let's get right to it. So the first question for all of the panelists, the title of this panel is The Greater Good. And before we learn more about your organizations, outside of that, what is the most impactful thing that you have done in giving back to your community? And how does that tie into your career?
Kate, I think I'll take that first, right? So
Julie, please.
Yeah. Yes. So most recently, I think volunteer service outside of my organization has been involved with vaccine equity work. So I've been working with a group of really extraordinary people at Get Out the Shot Los Angeles. I was a co-founder of that. We've been out on a regular basis. Liz Schwandt is a tour de force that works with us. And it's really about making sure that the vaccine is readily available and that we're removing barriers, especially for those that maybe have less access. So that's work that we've been doing, that I've been doing in my free time recently. And I think it ties into my work because, we really need to look at community care as holistic. While I do youth development work, it's really, folks need to be cared for in their bodies, right? And all of those factors are interplayed, right? Interplay. So there's social determinants and to health, right? So education ties in with health ties in with housing. All of the pieces are put together. So it's been really meaningful work to make sure we get more shots in arms in this really important moment. But it also benefits the communities that I serve in my workday too.
Thanks, Julie. That is very important work that you do. Ellen, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Katie, for asking the question, and thank you for having me here today. Well, I had a really hard time struggling with this question because it's very difficult for me to separate my work in my community and my work at work because the community with which I work is so huge, and the work is and the needs are the same in both places, and the skill sets that I have, I bring to both my local community and the synagogue that I've been on the board of for the last 15 years in many, many different roles. But I learned from what's happening in my community in Los Angeles, in the Antelope Valley, where I'm a representative of Supervisor Catherine Barger on the Child Care Policy Roundtable as one of my volunteer pieces, and the state of California and the whole greater community. I drive around my neighborhood and I see an increase in homelessness. And I did a lot of research on homeless families because I love to read and I love to study. And I looked at how many families are homeless, how many young children are homeless. And then I looked at what can I do as part of my work, as part of Child Care Resource Center, how can we impact that? I see the children of my friends struggling with finding good, safe childcare. And that is what we do at Child Care Resource Center. So I learned from what's going on around me. I love to read. My friends tease me about being the only people who go and read the legislation that created the Workforce Investment and Opportunities Act. I go to the source documents and I use those skills in both places. in the community in which I live and the community in which I work are pretty much one and the same for me.
Perfect. Thank you, Ellen. Alyssa?
Thank you. And first of all, thank you to the LA Business Journal for having me here today. I'm really excited to be on a panel with all of these amazing women and the women on the other panels today. I think for me, the most recent work and that's been the most impactful is I sit on the Santa Monica Planning Commission, and as everybody knows, we're having a housing crisis in California. And one of the things that we're working on right now is to prepare a housing element, which is a regulatory document that every city and county is going to have to do before October. And there is a real focus this cycle on really dealing with homelessness issues and building housing to accommodate our growing population and our changing population. And so it's very time consuming and difficult sort of technical work to figure out, what does this look like? And it's not always very popular to say that we need more housing, and we need more housing in certain places. And so we just had our recommendation of our draft that's going to be going to City Council. And so I feel really grateful to be a part of that. And I think that it's important work that we're doing to really talk to people and for people to understand and hear, we can preserve our neighborhoods and be good neighbors and be good citizens and still provide equity and right some old wrongs in terms of providing housing in our community. And I'm also a land use attorney by training and by day. And it's been extremely interesting to sort of be on the other side of the dais, right? And it's really made me rethink about how I represent my clients and what type of work I want to do, and just the overall picture of what planning and land use looks like in California.
Perfect. Thank you, Alyssa. And I apologize. I'm having some trouble. The sun is hitting my office right now as I speak, so I don't have this weird filter going on. So I apologize if it's distracting. And I wanted to add a little perspective here from me. So I'm very passionate about amplifying the voices of underrepresented populations. So most of the organizations that I'm involved with does that. So I volunteer my time with working on getting women on boards and mentoring young Asian professionals. And this is very reflective of what I do as work as well. I currently lead RSM's Women's Employee Network Group, and I used to lead our National Asian Employee Network Group. So it's really a joy to be able to do that at work. Let's move on to our next topic. Julie, I want to ask you about COVID-19 and its recent impact on the community. How did organizations like Woodcraft Rangers evolve so quickly to serve kids during COVID pandemic?
Yeah, it's been a wild year, right? With a lot of intense and complex need, and community-based organizations have really stepped in big ways, right? At Woodcraft Rangers, I think we started from a place where we'd done a lot of deep listening for a long time, right? So we were able to respond quickly because we really understood and anticipated some of the issues that were going to arrive, like connectivity, right? When it comes to students, we knew that the digital divide was real, right? And that there were going to be major concerns with connectivity. So within 2 weeks, we actually launched a text-based platform to send out messages to caregivers, understanding that students were going to be right in their homes, maybe cared for by older siblings or grandparents, right, as their parents were still out working. So over the next year, within 2 weeks, right, we were sending out text messages with activities that could be done at home and trauma-informed parent supports to over 8,000 families. And over the last year, we've sent over 1.3 million messages on that platform just to stay connected and tethered with our families, right? So I think that's just one example. We've also done a host of other digital clubs, hundreds of digital clubs, sending home kits, activity kits, just to stay connected to families. And I think what really allowed us to be so nimble was, we were operating in a time where we didn't have a whole lot of information, right? And we trusted that we had, we'd done that deep listening. We knew our communities really well, and we did the best we could, right? Knowing, anticipating those needs, right? We didn't wait for all of the information to necessarily have to present itself, right? We operated off of a lot of community trust and social capital we built over the years. So one of my key employees said, I never thought I'd see an institution like Woodcraft Rangers, which usually operates like a steamliner, move like a jet ski, but I think that's due to a lot of years of listening and being ready when the need got more complex.
Julie, thanks for sharing that with us. And I'm glad that you guys are listening to community and you acted so quickly. Ellen, I want to move on to you. Can you share with us what drives your passion?
Well, thank you, Kate. I have to smile because my father was a camp director for many years. And so I grew up hearing that my purpose in life or my job in life was to leave my campsite cleaner than I found it. That is our family motto. That and what I believe is my spiritual purpose in the world, which is to make the world a better place. That really formed who I am today and why I choose the work that I do as a social worker. Along those lines, I also as a leader really believe in the concept of a servant leadership, that to be a good leader, I need to be humble and listen and learn from everyone. And I really, truly do learn from everyone. That's the best way I know to think about what are the inequities I need to address? Where are the needs of our community? Where are my staff and what are they interested in learning? And where do they think we as an organization should go? And the other part of that is being willing to pound the table when I need to. So I do get very aggressive and I do kind of apologize sometimes for getting on a soapbox and making a plan and saying, well, what are we going to do next? So I developed my own mantra type question in my staff lab when I come and say it, but they all know I'm going to say, well, what else can we do for children and families? That we need to approach the family as a whole, and that sustainability and resiliency of families is our future. And I'm totally, totally committed to doing that and fortunate to be working in an organization that feels the same way. So that is my passion. I want the world to be a better place. I want there to end institutional racism. I want to make life better and stronger for families. So it is for children.
Ellen, thank you. I love that campground analogy. Stewardship is one of my favorite values as well, just leaving things better for the next generation. So thanks for sharing that. Alyssa, I'd like to move on to you. How has your background, education, and experiences shaped your volunteer efforts? And why do you take time to be involved in the community?
Well, I started off my life as a city planner thinking I was going to be and worked in community services and worked in a planning department and really wanted to do that because I was sort of raised in a way that giving back to the community is really, really important. And then I figured out that actually being a lawyer was a better way to do that, not just and working not inside the bureaucracy, but trying to influence the bureaucracy and I felt like I've had a little bit more power, for lack of a better word, with my law degree. And it's really helped me to come into focus, and it's really helped things. Again, for me, it all goes back to housing. I mean, I started studying housing in graduate school, and I'm still here advocating for housing. And it's really, I think what's important for people as they want to get more involved is that they find something that they're passionate about, right? I found something that I was passionate about, which is that placemaking is not just about making the community look more beautiful. It's also about how it functions, and it's about it being an equitable community that is open and diverse, and that I want to live in a community where we have diversity and where economic and racial and gender, and that it's open, there's open access to everyone. And so just in my original kind of passion about that, it's really evolved in that way.
Perfect. Thank you, Alyssa. I have another question for all the panelists. What are the greatest challenges you see short and long term that impacts non-for-profits in Los Angeles? Julie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. That is a big question, Kate. So I would say right now, right, we're in a moment of recovery, right? And the recovery is going to be uneven, right? So there's going to be, right, there's really transformational investments happening in infrastructure and childcare and schools right now. But I think for nonprofits, it's going to be an issue of capacity, right? So as we approach the next moment of intense need, right, I speak as a youth development agency, and bringing back, restoring health and wholeness to our children. So it's going to be an issue of capacity, and also I think long-term, it's going to require some flexibility, because these are this moment for our children, right? We've never encountered before, right? And we love to say unprecedented in this moment, right? But our kids are coming off of a huge period of isolation. And they're also, there's a mental health crisis among children right now too, because of it, right? So they need whole child supports, I think we've never been able to deliver before, right? So I think that in the space of youth, and Helen, you and I are in similar spaces, right? So, but I think, nonprofits are going to have to be flexible to be able to meet these needs, because I don't think they're ones that we can necessarily predict. We can be as ready as we can, and then we're going to need to be flexible, and be aware that this is going to be, there's going to be peaks and valleys, right? And the recovery is going to be uneven, and we just need to be ready to kind of ride that as it goes in service to communities.
Yeah, that's a great point. Alyssa, what are your thoughts?
I really think it's about money and resources, unfortunately. And so as we are, for City of Santa Monica, as we're like looking at what our budget is, and we're thinking really about, right, we need more housing, it needs to be done more quickly, we need more homeless services, we need mental health services for, the people that are in our community. And because of COVID, our budget has just plummeted, right? And so it's just lack of resources to be able to provide the resources at the municipal level. And then I also sit on a board, we do low-income housing for seniors, and it's also, right, the way that you build low-income housing is partly through state and federal money. And so as those monies are drying up, or we don't have there's just not as much money in the budgets as there were before, it's creating really a difficulty for us when we're really in a time of need.
Yeah, Alyssa, that's a good point as well. I actually work at a Chicago market, and I hear a lot of that going on in Chicago. So definitely understand where you're coming from. Ellen, like to get your thoughts on this topic.
Thank you. Alyssa, think about building childcare centers in the housing that you're building, and we can talk about that.
Yes, and yes.
No, it's interesting. Our contracts are primarily government contracts, government funded contracts. And CCRC has got about 1,000 staff, and we do many different kinds of services on behalf of families. So we are, in a way, COVID was good for our business, and was good for the women that we serve. And in some ways, it's also really been a major challenge. But the world now really knows that childcare providers are essential workers. You cannot go to work or school without childcare. So much of what we are funded to do, it really depends a lot on political will. And I think that political will is turning more now towards infrastructure and supporting women who are working. But at the same time, it's a little hard to plan where you're never really sure which way the wind is going to blow. And we have to fight to keep the needs of women, and particularly low-income women of color, who are the childcare providers and who are often the users of the service of childcare. And we do that through our advocacy in Sacramento. So we are kind of in a blessed moment in that a lot more money is coming down to provide childcare, and we need to grow really quickly. That is a blessing and a challenge at the same time. And at the same time, we're really not sure how that's going to last. So we've got to be able to be resilient as an organization and plan for all of that. The other challenge I think facing our nonprofit, and I'm glad you talked about intergenerational relationships, we had to, within 3 or 4 days, move 1,000 staff into homes to work from home. And that was a huge challenge. And yet, as we keep polling and listening and talking to our staff, we know that the younger staff really loved it. And 50% of them don't want to come back to the office. So we're going to have to learn how to, and we are been working very hard to become a flexible workforce strategy in our agency, where a significant number of our staff will be hybrid. They'll come in maybe 2 days a week, but they'll primarily work from home. So staying aware of what our staff want and our staff need, and responding to those changes is another big change for us as a nonprofit, and I think for a lot of nonprofits. We learned that the work can be done pretty well because we trust our staff from wherever they're working. So those are the two major things that we're facing as a nonprofit. It is feast or famine in the nonprofit world, depending on the will of the community and the will of the governments, and then the resources of the families who do make donations.
Ellen, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Your point about childcare. So recently, my company started offering childcare for those that are interested in getting vaccines. So things like that are very important as we try to figure this pandemic out, or as we emerge from this pandemic. So thanks for sharing that. Julie, the next question is for you. So I have a son that's entering junior high this fall. So this question is, I'm very interested in your answer to this question. How can schools look different as we emerge from COVID?
Yeah, so I have a almost a sixth grader too. So I'm right there with you, Kate, and a kindergartner myself. But Woodcraft Rangers, right? We serve over 80 school sites within Los Angeles County with what's called expanded learning, right? More folks might be familiar with terms like after school and summer programming. But right now, there are really significant and transformative investments happening at the state and federal level to provide these services. And these services, it looks like after school clubs in everything from STEM fields like robotics to coding to sports, right? Arts, a lot of social emotional supports. And I think this is a real moment of opportunity, right? So that every child can have a robust learning environment, cares for the whole child. And we can actually we're starting to see school requests come in that are bringing back arts during the day in a more meaningful way, right? That are bringing back summer programs throughout, right? Los Angeles Unified this year is going to be doing summer enrichment programs for elementary and middle school kids, right? At all Title I schools. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to take a whole a community and schools kind of approach and a whole child approach and bring back joy and learning and some of the fun things that I think historic cuts in funding have not allowed to be part of the school day. So I think that's exciting, right? So even in the month of April, agencies like Woodcraft, where we were reopening 75 schools. And I hear you, Ellen, about staffing. We added 400 staff members during the month of April because our request was now to be at the school from sunup to sundown, right? Supporting hybrid schooling and bringing enrichment and doing all kinds of things, right, to support families. So I think really getting families involved and bringing those robust experiences to every child this feels like a once in a generation moment for schools.
Can I just jump in as well? And I mean, I think it's really a once in a generation opportunity to really think about families and work and in a very different way, right? And I don't have any children, and so the pandemic was probably much easier for me than I think it was for some people, right? Because I wasn't trying to juggle the work and the family and everything. But of course it's made me rethink about the way I work, right? And it's made me how I rethink about the way I work with my team and what their needs are. And then this, of course, all goes back to housing and housing type and what we need, and having childcare facilities and having more community-based programs that we can be successful, right? That we can still be very productive and everybody can, right, make lots of money if that's what they want to do. But that we're also really thinking about different models, that you can do that in a different way. It doesn't have to be this traditional, everybody has to go into the office. There's no, like I've loved during COVID that people's dogs and kids and, right? Like that's real life and you can be productive and we can be successful together and help people.
Yes, 100%. I mean, that's the most common thing that I hear from people is they get to spend more time with their family. So absolutely agree. Ellen, why did you choose your line of work?
Well, as you probably guessed, I'm a boomer. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And when I chose a career in social work, I really, really believed that Lyndon Johnson and the United States of America could we could win the war on poverty. The fact that we're one of the richest countries in the entire world, and yet a significant, I think it's almost 50% of children are raised in homes in poverty. So I wanted to go, I was going to do it. I was going to win that war on poverty. And, with my work experience, I know that we probably won't ever win the war on poverty. And yet, it's a big disappointment to me. And yet it's really still a motivating factor to me that this is unfair. And that a lot of the war on poverty legislation was wonderful for its time, but it was made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And the institutional racism that's baked into that federal law, we're still suffering from that, I believe. So I think it's my job to point that out, to do what we can to change legislation, to be more fair where we can. Institutional racism is a big factor in inequities and poverty. We cannot end a war on poverty when people are redlined in their communities, when people are not able to learn because they can't get to school. I'm a big proponent of apprenticeships these days. That is an evidence-based model of bringing learning to where the people are and bringing people to college classes or learning in a cohort where they don't have to quit school to go to work and to raise their families. So that drives me, the fairness and the unfairness of the policy in this world, and the services that we provide, and the steps up and the legs up and the hand up and the hand width that we give primarily, again, to low-income women of color and families and the children they are raising and the childcare providers who are caring for those children. That's my passion, that we live in a world that this rich, and there's so much poverty and inequity that drives me to this day.
Ellen, that was so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story with us. Alyssa, I'd like to move on to you. How do your volunteer efforts intersect with your work life?
Well, I think I touched on that a little bit earlier. It's just really made me rethink a little bit how I do my job. And it's made me rethink the types, how I make presentations, honestly. It's made me rethink the types of clients I want to work with. And it's really directed me more towards something that is a little bit more these affordable housing and mid-market housing and moderate, and really paying more attention to who my clients are, what they represent, and what I want to represent.
Great. And then I have one final question for the entire panel again. What advice do you have for the folks who are looking to get more involved in boards, philanthropy, or charitable giving in the LA community? Julie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, happy to. Ellen's story, what drives you, so beautiful. And I think that's where people start, right? Start with their own why, the change that they want to make, right? And find an organization that's doing good work in that space, that's trusted by the community that it serves, and join efforts, right? Link arms with a community that's already doing that great work. And I think there's a host of opportunities, right? And people can give in talent, time, or treasure, right? There's a host of ways that people can have impact. But I think the most important thing is find an organization that whose mission speaks to you, just like Ellen so beautifully described her connection to the work that she does. And I feel the same way, right? Like I'm like, how did you find this work? I don't know. It found me, right? So I would say that, right? And boards, right? Boards are changing, boards are evolving, the composition of boards are changing, and this is a welcome change in nonprofit and I'm sure corporate boards as well. So knock on our doors, right? Find the institutions that are doing the kind of work that you want, the kind of change you want to see in the world. And then I would also say, we can't understate the power of advocacy, right? Because a lot of nonprofits, right, are fixing the problems that exist today. But I think that it is really important for us all to stay focused on really long-term systemic change that prevents these problems from existing, right? So both of those, kind of short-term and long-term, was work that has to be done concurrently. So find the agencies that speak to you, and then also I would also recommend, right, find what those agencies need and make sure that your skills are matched to what they need, because that's where you can do the greatest work.
And I'll throw one other question in there. If you want to address it, please go ahead. Is when from a not-for-profits perspective, what are some qualities that are important in the board members? But I'll turn it over to you, Ellen, first to answer the question that I posed.
Thank you. I really think Julie answered the question beautifully. So I'll just go to the short version. Go to ccrcca.org because we are always looking for diversity in our board members, diversity in knowledge and skills, and racial equity is a big thing for us. We're very fortunate that we have some of our parents in our Head Start centers are on our board. We need to hear from people in different communities. So find a place that is a good fit for you, as Julie's saying, the why, what drives you, what you're going to be using your volunteer time, which is, I'm sure, if it's anything like mine, it's hours that are few and far between. And we need a number of different skills. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. And then Alyssa?
Yeah, I would say what Julie said was brilliant. And so I will be short and sweet on that as well. Basically, like, find something you're passionate about and go volunteer and see if it's a good fit for you. And with regards to board members, I think what's important is that if you want to join a board, that you're dedicated and you're going to spend the time and that you have the skills.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been on a couple non-for-profit boards where, there are board members, but they're not attending meetings. And so absolutely, that's a really important factor of it. So that wraps up our discussion today. And I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you so much. You especially in the closing comments here, Julie and Elisa, you mentioned something that I've always commented on, and I have the same belief as it pertains to being involved in the communities and getting involved with different nonprofits. We often don't find them. Our passions find us, and they come to us. And for those of you who haven't found your passion, there's thousands and thousands of nonprofits out there that need our help and that need the business community to get more involved. So I want to thank this last panel, Kate, Elisa, Julie, and Ellen. Really fantastic. I think all of our panels today were informative, educational, and inspiring. Such a great way for us to kick off this series. I want to thank all of our panelists and all three of our moderators for their time and really their investment in the series. A lot of time and energy goes into the preparation of these. So I want to thank all of you for helping us kick this off. For those of you who are interested, you'll be able to review the results of the live poll questions that we did throughout the session up on our website, probably beginning tomorrow. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we have part 2, which is our second set of panels next week on Wednesday, June 16th, where we'll be covering organizational inclusion, leading through change, and work-life balance. And then 2 weeks from today, on June 23rd, we'll honor all of this year's award nominees and announce our winners for this year. So I want to thank all of you for tuning in today, and we look forward to hosting you again 1 week from today. Have a wonderful day.